So you remember Streets of Rage 4? That Miracle beat 'em up sequel that came out last year? The one that we did a review of right here on the channel? You know, the one that was one of my favorite games last year? Yeah, that just got around too. People over at .emu have been busy lately with a whole slew of new games coming out in the next year, but they saw fit to bless us in the meantime with a new expansion to Streets of Rage 4 dubbed Mr. X Nightmare, with a healthy bit of content added in, so I figured it was the perfect time to revisit the game. This won't be a full-blown review as I did for the base game, but either way, today we take a look at Streets of Rage 4 Mr. X Nightmare. Okay, so there's really not that much to break down here. As a matter of fact, the game handles that part for me by giving you the synopsis as soon as you open it up. Basically, the team wants to train in order to prep for any future problems, so Dr. Zan uses the actual brain of Mr. X, the original Syndicate leader, to cook up a Danger Room-style gauntlet and a simulator to provide the training that the group is looking for. It's very straightforward, and there's not much more to it because the DLC doesn't present itself as a story mode, so it's just flavor text as an excuse to deliver new things to do. No, the entire DLC is a couple of new modes, with the main attraction being a survival mode. In it, you can boot up random simulations or a specifically curated weekly simulation, and, well, it's a survival mode for sure. Handle increasingly difficult waves of enemies, deal with an occasional boss fight here and there that may occasionally show up in the tag team variety, and you try to see how far you can get. There's a little bit of spice here in that at the end of every round, you get to pick from a selection of buffs, and they can grant any sorts of bonuses like elemental attacks, increased power, extra jumps, the works. And some buffs actually function like a double-edged sword. For example, a power-up I see myself using quite often is one that allows 8% of the damage you deal given to your health bar as a healing method, with the downside being you can no longer heal by using items. Thankfully, as I said, you get to choose which bonuses you want, because when I'm playing Shiva, the last thing you need is to have the buff that buffs various attack stats at the cost of jumping, because that boy does damage in the air. Speaking of which, yeah, it wasn't just modes that were added, we also got new characters. They took the three good guys that served as bosses in the main game, Estelle, Max, and Shiva, and made them all playable, adding tons of new animations and moves to what was already seen, fully fleshing them out and adding that much more flavor to the roster. Estelle is kind of the middle ground addition here. She's not as fast and she doesn't run, but some of her moves travel and she can cover a decent bit of ground, which can be pretty effective so long as you're trying to hit enemies at the same time. Also, I joked that she was a Ronda Rousey ripoff in the last review, but she's totally an MMA fighter, hip tossing, Superman punching, and straight up ground and pounding enemies all over the place. She's definitely pretty satisfying when she drops grenades everywhere too. Max is the classic grappler the roster was missing before, reprising his role from earlier games. Definitely the slowest of the bunch, but very strong, and he even has multiple grabbing attacks and stuff, which is nice. I know a few people who are probably gonna have a blast with him. He's not personally for me though. My favorite character by far though is Shiva. He's everything I love in this game. Flashy animations, great combo potential, even in the air, which makes him stand out because when you throw in that double jump in survival, this man gets hang time. Also turns out they added a secret character that they didn't advertise at all leading up to the release, and it was one of my wishlist ads. Rue, but not a modern Rue, it's classic Rue. But still, I got something I was looking for originally, which is pretty hype. What I didn't get that I've been asking for since the beginning was 4-player online multiplayer, so that's a little disappointing, but nevertheless, they've added a practice mode which is pretty in-depth and you collect beaten enemies from survival to use in it, so that's pretty cool. All that said, between the new options for the game, you're going to be focusing the majority of your time in the survival mode, and not just for the challenge. See, this DLC builds upon the original game's replay value, which was already pretty high and essentially doubles it. The original game was replayable because continued play filled a lifetime EXP bar, which led to unlocking more characters, unlocking most of the characters in all of their iterations from previous games. Mr. X Nightmare wasn't pleased with just that and decided to add variety to every character's playstyles. With repeated use of characters in the survival mode, you unlock new moves for every character, and I mean every character, which you can mix and match, creating custom skill sets to further diversify your character. For a game that was originally only a couple of hours long, the fact that they can keep adding layers to this already replayable ass cake is incredibly impressive to me. And the presentation is just icing on that cake, I kid you not. The game was already really impressive, colorful, and varied in environments, but the survival mode reuses little, if any, of what already existed. Once the characters jack into the Matrix, they're met with all new environments to fight in. Everything from secret labs and Evel Knievel stadiums to volcanoes and temples. There's no need for explanations of these environments because remember, it's all a simulation. They even do this thing where there's a glitch transition between stages, which is really cool looking, because I keep finding flourishes all over the place that make me go, oh, that looks really dope. And if there wasn't already enough to love here, enter the man himself, Lopes. He was announced early on to be on the soundtrack, which made me all kinds of excited, because let's just say I'm familiar with his work, but I still wasn't prepared for how much we were getting. See, I was under the impression that he was splitting the track list with other composers, much like the main game soundtracks, but no. This madman did the entire soundtrack for the DLC, and I just can't stop listening to it. The tracks have all kinds of feels going. Where there's a loud, bombastic track like Spotlight Somersault, there's a high-tech action rave track like AI Supply sprinkled all throughout. I actually don't dislike a single song I've heard, but I swear, nothing hits me like the game over screen track Encore. And I know that team knew what he was doing when he named it that, because every time that track plays, I can't help myself from wanting to start a new run in survival, getting an encore if you will. They really did it. The guys over at .emu provided me with one of the most fun experiences I've had in 2021 so far, and it was an expansion to what was already one of my favorite games of 2020. I said it before and I'll say it again. Streets of Rage is a fantastic beat 'em up, but Mr. X Nightmare took everything I loved and doubled it at a meager $7.99 to boot. If you were looking for an excuse to play Streets of Rage 4 again, this is it. And if you hadn't tried it already, then what the hell are you doing? Get on that. They already have it as a complete bundle on your platform of choice. Although I will note at the time of recording that there's been big problems accessing the DLC on the Switch, which the devs have been very transparent about in their efforts to get it fixed on social media. So if you're on that, then I'd say just be a little more patient. They're trying as we speak. That said, I figured I could squeeze this one out easier while I was in between projects, but those are my thoughts on it. Let me know what yours are in the comments. And in the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.